really tell. Okay, so I'm done for the day after breaking yet another thing, but I'll get into that in a minute. But the oil filler cap I ordered worked just fine, and the ignition key I got works just fine, which I have that hid away now already. So I was running it there this morning for a little while. The front axle seemed a little strange, and this right front wheel was kind of flopping around a little bit, so I just figured it was something with this wheel again. And right about that time it started leaking antifreeze and it was getting a little warm, so I stopped and looked, and what actually had happened there, and we'll get to story one. Notice the other thing laying there. Pretty much the radiator cap went bad, it just wasn't sealing anymore. So I went down to Napa before they closed, which I found out they're open until 5, and got a new radiator cap. But what had happened with the steering and the front axle was, I don't know if you guys will be able to see it from this side, not as good. But short version of a long story, the weld broke on the keeper, and the front axle pin came the whole way back and was touching the crank pulley in there. And I screwed around for about 3 hours, got it back into place, ended up running that wire through it because it's actually a hollow tube to keep it from going back and hitting the crank. And the reason I actually noticed that was when I come up here and perked it, I put the loader down, took the weight off the front axle, it twisted that pin around, and it was rubbing the crank bolt. So I backed the crank bolt out, wrecked the bolt. I can only assume it wrecked the threads in the crank. I mean, it blued these, so I don't know how long it was turning in there before I heard it, and I must have not realized it. I must just thought it was the tail wheel on the brush hog squeaking or something. The shield squeaks on this thing terribly sometimes. So that's gonna be a fun one to fix, because I think I can get a tap and die up in there. I'll have to take a grinder and cut an access hole here in the front. It's actually dead center right here, and as beat up as this is, I don't really care too much. I'll just take a grinder and cut a piece out of it, and I can run a tap through the center and hopefully tap it for the same size. If not, I'll go to a coarse thread. This is a 3/4 bolt is what it is. There's that, and then right at the end of the day, after I shut the camera off, I went down in the woods for a second, and I broke the return spring off for the throttle down here, so I have to get a spring and put on it. The other thing I noticed was the right hand brake pedal does not return up the whole way, so I latched it back to the left side one again. I don't know what happened there. I'll have to get down and look at that. So anyhow, it's about 4:50. I'm gonna go down here, get some hot dogs to eat, and then I'm gonna go take the Thunderbird for a ride. And I'll do a separate video on that at some point here, but I don't know. If I can't get that crank bolt fixed, I better quit using this thing. I was halfway through this morning when that happened, and I was just hoping that crank pulley stayed on there. That's all I could do. You know, what can I do up here? I ain't got a 3/4 fine thread tap. Even if I did, how am I gonna get in there and use it? So I'll have to have that plan ready next time I come over, and next time I come over, I guess I'll just have to plan to work on the tractor for a while, which I worked on the tractor for a while this morning, trying to make a peace offering, and I found with this tractor, if you work on it, something else breaks, so you're normally better off just to leave it the heck alone. So that's it for me today, guys. Not a whole lot of video. I was just mowing, and I was just perturbed, because for a while I only had the front axle bushing about 1/4 of the way in, and second time I finally come back up here, and I got it just right that I was able to slide it back in by hand, and then I put that wire through it. So okay, like I said, quitting while I'm ahead, go eat dinner, and hopefully have a little bit of fun, and per usual be chasing parts through the week. So later, guys. Well guys, I think it's been about a month since I've been up here at the farm, and it's growing up pretty decent. I think you guys can see by the grass line here at the end of the lawn. But yeah, And it's funny, the spot that has grown the most is right here beside the tractor. So, I guess I'm going to look the big girl over here, and I know that left front tire is flat, which it's always flat anymore. I got a tap for the crank. Try and tap the crank, change out the front axle bolt, and I'm going to weld the keeper. So let me get the oil and stuff checked here, and we'll pull her out in the lawn and see what I can do. It looks like this rear tire is low too. I'll have to kind of look at that in a minute. Okay, let me start checking stuff over, guys. See what she does here. I know I haven't been over here for about a month, so. I forgot the return spring's broken on the throttle. I'll have to work on that in a minute. Figure maybe I ought to take a little bit of video before I go for lunch, but I got about 4 passes into it over there, and then the tractor just shut off dead. That surged for a second before that, and I thought it was a new return spring I put on the throttle, but lo and behold, it had plugged up the fuel tank outlet. So I had fun bleeding the diesel system on this, or the fuel system. Eventually I was about ready to give up, and then it popped off and went. And it's been running good since. Now I'm scarred, so I take the fuel cap off and look at the return in there and see if it's spewing fuel out every so often. But while I was doing that, I noticed the radiator is leaking slightly. It's got a spot in it, it's just like a pinhole. It just stays wet and puts a little bit of radiator fluid down across the axle and stuff. It's not bad, but I am when I come back from lunch, I'll top it off. I only have water, but it'll be a whole lot better than nothing in it. It does have some antifreeze. Top it off, and maybe when I get her back home, I'll put a little bit of stop leak in it or something, or I'll look up price for radiator. For today, I'm just going to run it. Rear tire was flat this morning. Return spring is on it. I welded the front axle keeper. I could not get a tap to start into the crank, and I really didn't want to putz with it right now, so just run it kind of easy. And I get this mowed today, and then it's going to go about 15 miles closer to the house, so it'll be easier for me to go up and look at. So, alrighty fellas, off to lunch at 1:30 in the afternoon. You know how it goes. I've had nothing but fuel issues all day long. It's been the same issue, I just can't get it fixed. Alright, well, I'm going to go up here and start it off, leave it for there, and go back and disassemble it. Later, guys. And all done, guys. I legit just had to bleed the fuel system again. I'm gonna come up here and shut it off. Yep. That's it. I'm gonna go get some dinner and start shuttling the parts for this thing home. And that's gonna be a wrap, guys. She looks kind of nicked without all her stuff on, don't she? Eh. Well, I got Big Bertha here all loaded up and tied down and ready to hit the trail, even tied down before the rain starts. But made a huge difference at this place. Also wrecked the tractor a good bit, but can't have everything. So, alright, to the house. Slowly, I might add. It's not even overloaded, look at it. So, made it back home. No issues at all hauling it. One thing I did notice, because I stared at this thing in the mirror for 40 minutes, is that the loader frame on this side is definitely bent way down. Like, I don't know if you guys can see it, but there is a good inch or inch and a half difference on this corner. So, interesting. I wonder if this was broke and put back together and it's just that far out of square, maybe? I don't know. Loader frame is kind of the least of my concerns right now. Put a radiator in it and stuff, and I'll go from there. So, anyhow, until I get around to that, until I get some extra money, I think it's probably where she's going to sit for a little while. Need some new tires on the front too. Also, since I actually took the bucket off, I realized how crappy it is. So, anyhow, later.